Hey guys, wanted to tell you real quick about our podcast host and sponsor, Anchor.fm. If you're thinking about starting your own podcast, I highly recommend Anchor. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. They'll distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go out to Anchor.fm to get started. That's Anchor.fm. Now back to the show. The Cannabis Heals Me Podcast, episode 122.
You're listening to the Cannabis Heals Me podcast, where we explore the real stories of real people who have discovered the profound healing properties of the cannabis plant in their own lives. Find more at cannabishealsme.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Cannabis Heals Me podcast. This is your host, Rachel Kennerly, and we're recording once again at the Storybook Inn Studios. In case anyone's counting, and I'm sure no one is not, because I certainly am not, this is the third episode in a week. It feels like maybe we might be getting back on track, or I might be getting back on track. And the people that I want to talk to are getting back on track because now they want to talk to me again. So I am ecstatic that we are able to bring you a third episode in a week. If the third episode in as many weeks, if you're enjoying the show, please go out and give us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever podcast app that you prefer to use, Stitcher, whichever one. If you would give us a rating or review on one of those apps, we would certainly appreciate it. And the reason I ask you to do that is because it helps boost the algorithm, and your podcast app will recommend us to other people who are listening to similar type content. It's a free way for us to get more word out about the podcast. Also, I want to ask you to tell 3 people this week about the podcast. Pick out your favorite episode and say, hey, you really need to go listen to this. This is some great information. Did you know that we have an endocannabinoid system in our body, and cannabis, aka marijuana, aka the devil's lettuce, can actually feed that endocannabinoid system and help heal our bodies? And if you would share the podcast with 3 people, we would certainly appreciate it. Before I introduce my guest, I want to let you know that there is some R-rated language in this episode. So if there are any little ears within earshot, make sure you shoo them out of the room if you don't want them to add to their vocabulary today. I am joined today by Fabian Henry. He's the founder and director of Breton Cannifarms. He's the president and founder of Global Alliance Foundation Fund, which subsidizes Veterans for Healing, which is a nonprofit that he co-founded in 2014 with the aim of helping veterans recover from trauma. He was also recently featured in a documentary I came across not too long ago called Unprescribed. So Fabian is joining us today to talk about his journey to find cannabis as medicine. Fabian, welcome to the program.
Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, I watched the documentary, is it prescribed or unprescribed?
Unprescribed. Yeah.
Unprescribed. Okay, I wanted to make sure I got that right. So I watched the documentary Unprescribed, and you were actually on that documentary telling your story. And we didn't get to hear all the story, I don't suppose, because it's just small little clips. And I don't think you really went into your personal story too terribly much in the documentary. So I was going to see if I could have you come on and go into a little more depth on what your personal story is with medical cannabis.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kimberly. And yeah, unprescribed is not really about the Canadian veteran up north. It's more about the unprescribed American veterans who don't have access to medical cannabis. In Canada, we're fortunate enough not only to have access to federally regulated medicine, cannabis medicine, but also our VA pays for it. So, we don't have to spend our money going out trying to find our medicine. So we're fortunate in that sense.
Absolutely. That's incredible. I didn't realize
personally, the VA pays $8.50 a gram
nice.
for up to 3 grams a day. And that should be accessible to the guys and gals in the South that are also suffering with trauma and not getting access to the best Band-Aid possible, because it's still a Band-Aid for trauma. Over the years, we've learned that it replaces receptor deficiency. Like mostly it's the anandamide receptor, the happy receptor in the brain. And using cannabis replaces that happy receptor and makes you feel what we call normal for at least a few hours. That's why we have to keep using it, because it's like it works, but it's only for a few hours, and it's still just a Band-Aid. In my experience, I'm 41 today, but
happy
I've never
birthday.
used cannabis until I was 31 years old. No. I'm 41 in 10 years ago was the first time cannabis touched my lips at age 31. And before that, I'd never tried it. I never really used it. So from there, it was kind of like, it felt like you go to Afghanistan, you go to Iraq, you come back, you're injured. You're supposed to suck it up, but you can't really. You just fucking drink more. Pardon my language.
You're good.
They prescribed 9 pills a day to Fabian Henry, like SSRIs and benzos, Seroquel, Abilify, Trazodone, clonazepam, Effexor, like max doses, where to the point my male organs stopped working. And
oh my goodness,
for 2 yeah, and it's an embarrassing thing. Like a decade ago, at 31 years old, and here you are trying to like take the medicine that the army doctors give you, but it's pretty much killing you. There is no pill for PTSD, and there is no cure. There's just trying to manage. So then I explored cannabis, and lo and behold, I felt good for the first time in quite a while. And then from there went on to educate the use of medical cannabis. I opened up 14 clinics across Canada in 2 years, registered over 12,000 medical patients, helped about over 2,000 veterans get access to this medical cannabis and have it paid for by our VA. So that awesome. Was a big milestone up until 2016. Because it's like I was saying, Kimberly, like I don't need to get into my story, to be honest, because it's no different than anyone else that's been to combat or been to war. They'll get on to tell you the same thing. You love it when you're doing it. It's you're a soldier, and that's why you join. But you also think that they'll take care of you when you get back and you're injured, and that's where the breakdown happens. So my story isn't any different. That I was addicted to alcohol. I had to go to inpatient care for 60 days, all of that stuff, before I found cannabis. So that's that. But it's, what do you do after you're on cannabis? Do you just sit at home in your basement and smoke weed? Because that ain't the answer. You treat the symptom with the right Band-Aid, and then you need a trusted psychologist that you can do the therapy work with. Yeah. Now, I tried it on 9 pills a day, and I couldn't communicate really. And now I got on cannabis, and I've been doing therapy for 8 years with my therapist, and it helps. Just stay focused and checking in and doing the work on your inner healer. Why you have an addiction issue? Why do you have trauma? And doing that behavioral therapy around it, and working on your fractured spirit is what I have. What we have is this fractured spirit. You come back, you go out a warrior, you come back with these fractures, and it's like, how do we get the guy's spirit back and loving life and connected to nature? And so we, through cannabis, therapist, yoga, meditation, nature, drumming, feasting, fires, ceremony, peer support, there's all kinds through all of this stuff, and having that tribe support network. Guys tend to go from being right out to lunch on trauma, getting sorted out through an addiction facility, getting on the medical cannabis, doing the therapy for a couple of years, connecting with your peers, doing yoga, and then all of a sudden you see trauma become an accelerant to growth. There's a point where they start to feel good again on this medicine, the eating better, exercising, being in nature, and then they find a purpose somewhere. That glimpse of their spirit or their self comes out. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. Like there's a lot of successful veterans who were a mess and are now doing very well. And that's a beautiful thing to see.
Absolutely. And y'all in Canada are so fortunate to be able to have access to the medicine. Now, you mentioned that you had never used cannabis until you were 31 years old. I'm assuming that you probably totally bought the narrative that you were taught in school in the military
100%.
that don't touch this stuff.
Yeah, no, I bought in hardcore, and I come from a coal mining family, a hardworking family. So, and played hockey. So I didn't smoke cigarettes, and I didn't do any drugs, and I didn't smoke marijuana. And I thought, yeah, it's drugs, it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
In the military, like, definitely didn't do it in the military. It's like charge the guy or whatever. But
yeah,
I'm the first to say I was completely wrong. I didn't even know we have an endocannabinoid system as humans. Every human has one. So I had no idea about that. And why do we have one? It's to receive cannabinoids.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm depleted in my receptor deficiency, I need cannabinoids to replace that deficiency. And I didn't know that. And it's funny, like Dr. Neumeister at NYU Langone Medical Center, he was the lead researcher. If you look up his work, and he explains the receptors.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something we all need to get educated on.
Absolutely. Now, how were you introduced to it? Were you just desperate to try something that would help? And somebody said, hey man, if you try this, it'll work. And you're like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Literally, I'm living in my military housing. I'm waiting to be medically released, and I'm taking all these pills, and I'm drinking. And my next door neighbor was just a young 19, 18-year-old who was like, dude, like, you have to smoke weed, right?
Yeah.
And finally, like, I had no other option. I'm 3 years on all these pills, and I said, yeah, I'm going to smoke it. And I smoked it in the garage with him, and I just kept smoking it until I puked. Like, I greened it. They call it greening out or whatever. But it was the best feeling I've had in years. I felt a glimpse of my spirit again, and I could feel when I've been like a zombie wearing a pharmaceutical helmet for years. Mm-hmm. You can't feel shit.
Yeah.
And you wonder your parts don't work because you can't feel anything.
Right. Now, is it...
and that's what the Zopiclone and the clonazepam, that's what it does to you.
I guess the Canadian doctors for the VA, y'all's VA, are kind of similar to the ones here in the USA. It's just, we're going to just push pills down your throat. There's no thought of any, or at the time, I guess, no thought of any alternative treatment methods.
No, you can't even speak of Eastern philosophy medicine at all. It's their way or no way. And if you can't follow that, then, get out. And I understand the military, all militaries, they need a well-oiled machine with parts on a shelf that if you're broke, they just replace the part and the machine has to keep going. And that's fine. But don't fucking say you're going to take care of us and we come home broken. I've been to 15 funerals of people killing themselves here in Canada.
Wow. And
there's 22 a day. There's 6,000 a year in the States taking their lives. And if that doesn't set off alarm bells, then, fuck you, man.
Right.
Sorry, but this is my attitude. And it's not always politically correct because they don't go to the funerals.
Right.
They don't get their feet dirty with these guys. They don't try to help at all. They actually try to sweep it under the rug.
Yes.
And just hand you fistfuls of pills. Somewhere along the line of that pharmaceutical, if you go all the way back, someone's making money giving us medication that's hurting us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's disgusting.
Yeah, they send
you
guys.
If the medicine's working, but it's not working.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's plainly obvious to everyone who cares to even look. It doesn't work. And now we've got this plant that you guys are used, and you're told, hey, you're going over there and you're fighting for freedom. And then when you come back, you don't even have the freedom to choose the medication that you can use.
Yeah, and it's just funny. And I know it's a transitional, pioneering kind of time right now. But there's no excuse. The evidence is there now.
Yes.
Be it it's not clinical for phase 4 research, but there's a ton of evidence-based research that should give us the benefit of doubt because of the consequences are suicide or death or, destruction in your life and divorce and just miserable situations. So
yeah.
I say, why not try the plant medicine first, not last?
Exactly.
It's a plant.
Yeah. Have
If the
you
plant don't work, then let's move on to the man-made pharmaceuticals.
absolutely? Have you found that the doctors' attitudes in Canada have changed towards cannabis since it's been legalized, or is there still that rigidity?
Well, not not only has it changed, they've dropped it down from just physicians being the gatekeepers to one step under. A nurse practitioner is now allowed to prescribe cannabis.
That's great.
So all doctors, all nurse practitioners can prescribe medical cannabis, and it's very easy to get access in Canada now. We could do a Skype video like this with your nurse or doctor and have a prescription any day of the week,
Oh
anywhere
wow,
in the
that's
country.
awesome. Yeah, that's great
Yeah.
news.
So yeah, and that's, we're past that. It's like, I understand the need of having access in the States. It's a real issue that needs to be addressed, but you also need to be addressing it in a total health treatment package.
Yeah.
I need the cannabis, but I also need the therapist. I also need my peers. I also need yoga and meditation and, Reiki and massage and nature. And I need some other things. I don't just need cannabis. And if that's the focus, like, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the whole package and in seeing the person find their spirit and get back to life again.
Yeah, because cannabis is just one small part. You've got to do all the other stuff on top of
A tool.
it. Yeah. Now,
It's a tool, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of stigma, or used to be. Maybe it's becoming more accepted. There's always been this stigma around seeking out mental health and talking to someone. There's like, well, there's something wrong with you if you go and do that. Is that stigma? Is it, or you're not manly or womanly enough if you have to go talk to somebody? Is that stigma kind of being reduced now, or is it still, are still a lot of veterans held back because of that?
It's funny. It's a good question. It's a great question. And it's good timing for that right now. In the UK, for example, those guys, they're what we'd say is hard as fuck, and their mentality is all about, I'm a soldier and there's no such thing as taking a knee for a brain injury. They are 100% wrong. And
Yeah.
I'll be the first one to take the podium and let them know that actually you're the one who's destructing your own life by not seeking better treatment, or not even acknowledging you have an injury and just drinking your life away or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So we can hold people accountable. In Canada, from the general to the colonel down to the private, they're all using medical cannabis, whether it's CBD for their pain, a little bit of indica oil for sleep at night, a little bit of sativa for their depression, a little bit of indica THC for PTSD. Like, it's multiple uses and multiple delivery methods. And the warriors in Canada, they're not taking the pills anymore. They found a plant medicine. They're like, this works. Thank you very much. And they're on with their program.
That's
whoever
great.
their peer, whoever they're connected to. And so it's a beautiful model that's happening now, that's transpiring. Mind you, it's still a bit of a mess with quality and consistency, but we have access, we have treatment, it's covered, and more and more veterans are opening up their own wellness centers and taking care of each other that way. So we're fortunate here. This should be adopted in the States, and I would love to have that opportunity someday to present, look, this is exactly how it happens in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It's paid for. Everybody's doing better now on this program, following this direction. And people are engaged in their therapy and doing well. So why not give that a try? Because what's going on just isn't working. Show us the data where there's a program that's working.
Right.
It's hard to find.
Right. Now, y'all do a lot of peer support as well, because one of the things I noticed in the movie, in the documentary, is that you guys had a big gathering of veterans.
Mm-hmm. That's Mama Lutz. She's got a beautiful story, and she's a beautiful woman whose sons have served. And I won't tell her inspirational story. You'll have to watch the video. But she's a beautiful human being that, in spite of what happened with her children, she's using that as her focus to go forward. And she's connecting veterans all over the States, all over the place, into Canada. She has a nice little app out for peer support. And it's these kind of people and these kind of things that bring us and keep us at least connected. Like, I brought 3 veterans up here to Canada to our retreat in the woods that are on that video, Josh, and Frank, and Steve. And, they seen how we do it up here. And that's why they're now saying, like, we need to do what they're doing up there, man. We have the medicine, we have the tribe, we have the fires, the gatherings. And that's what we're missing. That's where the kicked out of your tribe. And who am I now if I'm not a soldier?
Right. Because you're part of a unit. You've got a team, and then you come home and it's like your team is gone. You're just kind of floating around with nobody. And your family, although they love you, they can't really.
Nobody's holding your hand.
Yeah. And your family, as much as they love you, they can't relate to what you experienced over there.
No, it's there's a video called Go Ruck for civilians who want to kind of know what it's like to be an elite soldier. I think it's a 40-hour hell marathon, but it's a good documentary to give civilians an eye-opener to how difficult it can be in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. While they're just doing training in their comforts of the woods in the States, take that difficulty and put bullets in your hand and go out and fight the enemy with that same hardness. It's tough, but it's those warriors who become the most broken. They've dedicated so much. And then when you fracture that and say, get the fuck out of here, you're no more good. It's like the head's spinning. It's like, what do you mean? Like, I gave everything. I would have died for this country.
Yeah.
Or I did, a lot of people did die for this country.
Yeah.
But there's a breakdown upon coming home.
Is the suicide rate, because we've got 22, 23 veterans a day here in the States committing suicide, are the rates similar in Canada? And have you seen any change in that since cannabis was legalized?
Right. Yes. The rates are similar in proportion to the amount of people who deployed and the amount of people. So in ratio perspective, yes, it's alarming what's happening. And has it curbed a little bit? I would have to say, yes, it definitely curbed since 2014 to now. It hasn't stopped, but there was no access anywhere. It was just a lot of hot messes out there rolling the dice, walking around. So it's taken several years now. We're 7 years into the program in Canada, and it's still quite a bit of mess. People still are taking their lives. But it's not as frequent as when, after 07, 08, 09, 2010, 11, 12, there was a lot of people blowing their faces off. And
then you've got the ones
our most tragic. Yeah, sorry. No, I was just going to say our most tragic client, to put this in perspective of how real trauma can be in Nova Scotia. A young man who was a sniper in Afghanistan took his mother's life, his wife's life, and his daughter's life before taking his own life.
Oh my goodness.
And was like a national tragedy here. And was looking for help and trying to find help, and didn't get what he needed. And this was the outcome, and it was very unfortunate because there's not enough treatment, let alone for veterans, but for trauma alone, there's not enough treatment. And then the treatment that's available, some of it's not working. They don't accept cannabis. They want you back on the pharmaceuticals to get into the treatment.
Right. And some of the side effects of the pharmaceuticals are increased suicides. Like one of the side effects, it's like suicidal thoughts. It's like, we already had those.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So when somebody really digs into the deep details of all this, it's disgusting. It's alarming. Like, it's hard to comprehend how I know this, like, systemic racism stuff. Well, this is one of those systems, man. Like, this is one of those systems it's not adjusting. It is what it is, and it's whether it's hurting people or not. They're not adjusting the system to make it better. And that's the military wheel. And so be it. They need it nice and fresh to fight wars, I guess, and make other people money or something. I don't know. But, and that's where we're at.
Yeah. Is because we feel like, I don't know if you probably feel this way too, but it's like the pharmaceutical industry just has so many tentacles and everything here in politics and the media. and everything. So is it similar in Canada where they've got their fingers in everything? And how are y'all able to break loose from that and actually get some legalized cannabis?
Right. We got lucky with a court case in the early 2000s of a veteran winning his right to have access to medical cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just say only a few doctors were prescribing way back then. So that gave you options. You could either, there was only one supplier at the time with only one strain, or you could grow your own. So for a long time, there was only about 100 veterans in Canada growing their own at home in their garage and not, just kind of hushing about it because it was still extremely stigmatic, and you couldn't just come out and you stink like cannabis. No, it's a terpene profile that can be measured under gas chromatography. It has a graph. That smell makes me feel good, so piss off, right?
Yeah.
Once you learn about this, and because at first, yes, it stinks. It's because you don't use it for your benefit, and it doesn't make you feel good because you don't eat it. And when you do, that smell has a relation to a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so does essential oils,
Yeah.
There's healing powers. Same thing with terpenes, it's called. And the little crystals on the buds are called trichomes. That's the medicine. So we need to pull the medicine off. And really, if you want, put that extract in a pen, and that'll work if the stink is an issue. So there's so much to learn. There's over 100 cannabinoids in this plant in the profile. We know like about, a dozen: CBD, CBG, CBN, THC, CBW. We don't know really what they do. We haven't, it's an exciting thing. If I was in school, or I would recommend somebody in school, this is an exciting avenue to be studying, because it's going to take a long time to study all the profiles and the, entourage effect versus straight extract oil versus oral ingestion. So, I'm just excited to be in this space and time right now.
Yeah.
And learning, always trying to listen to what the guys say makes them feel better. And, for sure, the cannabis is one tool that works. It's not a cure. It's just a tool. And
yeah, one piece of the puzzle. Well, tell folks what you're up to these days. You're a very busy guy. You sent me a list of all the stuff you're done. I'm like, dang, does this guy sleep?
No. With PTSD, another thing is, not only do you not sleep, you need to occupy your brain. We can't sit still and just be like, we need to be busy, filling that space with something, either throwing disc golfs or raking rocks. It doesn't matter. But as far as what I'm working on is launching a production facility to grow the medical cannabis and focus on the science, the quality and the consistency, so that you can in turn deliver to the patient what they need on a regular basis, and not say, we're out this month, would you like to try something else? Imagine going to the pharmacy and saying, we're out of your Effexor, would you like to try Seroquel? That's not even allowed. And that's what's happening now. So that needs to be fixed. So we're trying to tackle that problem. We have therapists working with us that if somebody needs one, we can connect our guys to trusted therapists. But where my heart lies is in developing our retreat in Piper's Glen, Cape Breton. We have a 130-acre property that, once you're on the Band-Aid, once you have a therapist, this is where you will come and do your tribal work and repair your spirit through fire, drumming, hiking, little small party task, maybe build a small walkway bridge type thing, or, do something together. That's where the connection, there's my tribe, there's my heart, somebody loves me in this world still, cares about me. That's where I spend a lot of my energy and time, is just specifically helping veterans get to that point.
And is that the Gaff organization that does the retreat stuff?
That's the Gaff. So right. So I started a company called Marijuana for Trauma. I donated all my ownership to start this charity called Gaff, or it's a nonprofit right now. So I donated over 67 million shares into holding into Gaff, which is
Wow.
called the Global Alliance Foundation Fund, but in the military we call it the give a fuck factor. So, once these shares appreciate, our nonprofit, the Gaff, should be worth a few $1,000,000, where we can then do some damage in the nature side, building what we need, like our obstacle course, our zip lines, our the right cabins, and the right tools we need to be effective in repairing the spirit.
That's awesome.
So we have a plan. It's a long-term plan, and every year we keep bolting on, and we'll get there.
How many veterans have y'all do y'all serve? Is it the same guys that come out, or do you kind of bring them through in phases, or?
Right. So right now it's more piloting small groups of people we know that have been in therapy and in treatment, and it won't be until probably summer of 2022 before we start launching supervised, structured, from the minute you show up to the minute you leave retreats with therapists on site and these kind of things, because eventually, if you're going to want to come here and you see what we're doing, you got to go back and get in line and make sure you're on the right medicine. Make sure you have a therapist, because I can't take you here and babysit you and you didn't do the work and everyone else did the work to get here, because it won't work out. We've already learned that. So we need people to get in line, do the work it takes to get to the healing. And some guys can do it on their own, and some guys need to be connected. We just want options. It's not
yes.
Our model can be anywhere in the next town, the next province, the next state, wherever. But this is what's working. People want to repair their spirits.
Yeah,
like that's what's fractured. Looking inward and getting that work done.
Well, that's great that incentivizes people to go back and do the work so that they can come and join in these type things. So I think that's great that you say, hey, if you do this, then you can come do this. And sometimes that's what people need.
Well, they're looking, or you're lost, or you're looking for direction when you have trauma. You're spinning and you're disassociating, and you're like, there's other work to do to repair some of those pathways. And in Theogenic Therapy, you may have heard of people using ayahuasca. A new thing out is psilocybin is taken on the market pretty quickly to treat depression and trauma. And I'm familiar in this space as well. And it's about activating non-ordinary states of consciousness. And that's where some of the work gets done too. But that has to be done with either a doctor or a shaman in a controlled ceremonial way. But that stuff's happening, and there's some great results coming out of that as well. Yeah,
there's been, I think,
that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, it is. I think there's been some states here in the U.S. that have legalized psilocybin. What is the status of psilocybin in Canada?
It's legalized for life-ending care, like cancer patients type thing. But it's coming. It's coming, and this fungus has a purpose. And you read Terence McKenna's book on heroic dosing, or taking 5 grams at one time, which I do not recommend doing unless you're supervised. These are, you have to do your research. If you're just coming in blind, taking handfuls of this or that and the other thing, you need to go back before Pillar 1 and get in and get some help, and then get in the program type thing.
Right.
So it's easy to pick up on that now, what people's intentions are. You have to set your intention. You don't just smoke weed all day. You have to thank that plant for sacrificing her life. She's the divine feminine, and she's potentially saving your life. She saves mine on a daily basis. So I have an attitude of gratitude for Santa Maria, and I'm blessed that we have access. But I'm always willing to do these kind of things. And another call coming up with the group, for the boys and Janine from the documentary, because awareness and education, eventually these lawmakers and policymakers got to look in the mirror, and they got sons and daughters and people who served, and their kids are telling them, Dad, are you fucked? Like, come on, it's the 21st century. Like, cannabis is working, So it is coming, and it is going to be mainstream. My kids and my kids' kids, they're going to laugh at all this, It'll be in every drugstore everywhere. CBD for everyone.
Yeah, just like it used to be. It used to be in the drugstore. You could go down to the drugstore and get your cannabis It was sitting on a
Right.
shelf. So.
And they put the stamp in the vault, locked up the stamp. Nobody can get it anymore. That's it.
Yep.
People are feeling too good is what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then when you feel good, you start challenging those systems.
Yes, absolutely. If folks want to find out more about what you're doing and follow kind of the work that you've been doing, what's the best place for them to do that?
On Facebook, follow us. It's called Veterans for Healing. That's our Facebook page where we, show what's going on and stay updated. And our website of our 4 pillars that you can follow is called gaffhouse.org, GAFFHOUSE.org. And you can follow those 4 pillars and you can reach out through the website. And that should guide you somewhat back to your authentic self.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for your time today, Fabian. You're, like I said, you're a busy guy, so I appreciate you taking some time with me this morning.
My pleasure, Kimberly.
Yep. Well, we'll hopefully we can touch base soon about getting the guys and gal back together for Unprescribed and do a little chat on that.
Exactly.
That'd be great. I was curious before.
I'm available anytime for you. This is important.
Yes, definitely need to get the word out. And folks, if you haven't checked out the documentary Unprescribed, you need to go do that. I will put a link to everything that Fabian's mentioned today, as well as to the documentary Unprescribed in the show notes for today's episode. Thank you so much, Fabian, and we'll be in touch. Show notes for today's episode can be found out at cannabishealsme.com/122. Hopefully, I'll be able to maintain this role and be back with you on Monday of next week to share another cannabis healing story. Until then, you guys have a great week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I certainly appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button and you'll never miss an episode of the Cannabis Heals Me podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or whatever podcast app you're using. Do you have a suggestion for a guest on Cannabis Heals Me? Send an email to podcast@cannabishealsme.com. We'd love to hear from you. Please do not take any information from Cannabis Heals Me or its guests as medical advice. Contact your licensed physician before taking cannabis or using it for medical treatments.